Greenview Terraces is a quiet suburban enclave nestled in the outskirts of a mid-sized American city. Rows of elegant townhomes and single-family houses line gently curving streets, each property boasting meticulously trimmed shrubs and uniform mailboxes. An ornate sign at the entrance reads, "Greenview Terraces, where neighbors thrive together." Beautiful oak trees frame the neighborhood, and a meandering walking path circles the central lagoon, offering scenic views that attract dog walkers every morning. Behind this tranquil facade, however, lurks the all-seeing eye of the Greenview Terraces Homeowners Association. While many residents appreciate the HOA's efforts to maintain order, ensuring tidy lawns, consistent house paint, and a sense of aesthetic harmony, others find it stifling. Over the years, the HOA has grown more powerful, passing strict bylaws that govern everything from holiday decorations to porch furniture. Complaints about seemingly trivial violations have become common. Amid this environment, neighbors tread carefully, aware that even small breaches can bring formal letters or fines. Most try to follow the rules to avoid trouble, though a few outspoken souls occasionally question the HOA's firm grip. They whisper that it's not the HOA as a whole that's so troublesome, but certain individuals, particularly one fierce board member who has become a neighborhood legend in her own right. Beatrice Farnham, or, as many call her with a roll of their eyes, Karen. Beatrice Farnham is in her mid-50s, proud to a fault. Her immaculate bobbed hair, always carefully styled, seems as rigid as her approach to community regulation. She typically sports pastel blouses paired with pressed slacks, exuding an air of corporate efficiency. A clipboard or binder, brimming with rules and guidelines, often dangles from her arm. Beatrice's manner is crisp, even haughty. She speaks in a tone reminiscent of a strict teacher reprimanding unruly students. Many folks find her presence oppressive. She's infamous for scolding people who park a few inches off the curb or hang wind chimes deemed too loud. Some neighbors admit they hurry inside when they spot her coming, hoping to avoid a confrontation. Behind closed doors, residents share tales of her petty meddling. One woman swears she found Beatrice skulking around her backyard, measuring the height of a bird feeder. Another recounts being accosted for improperly storing a kiddie pool. Yet the HOA leadership seldom reins her in, as Beatrice claims to be defending property values and preserving Greenview Terrace's prestige. She thrives on her self-appointed role as enforcer, and few have dared challenge her until recently. Still, while Beatrice's meddling annoys most everyone, no one imagined she could escalate into outright cruelty, physically destroying a neighbor's possessions. That line, once crossed, would shock the entire community, exposing the extremes to which she'd go in service of her rigid vision. And at the heart of this conflict stands an unassuming retiree with a gentle passion for painting. In stark contrast to Beatrice's forceful demeanor is Oliver White, a 78-year-old resident with a mild temperament and a kindly twinkle in his eyes. He's lived in Greenview Terraces for nearly a decade, having downsized after losing his wife years prior. Quiet and soft-spoken, Oliver rarely drew attention until people discovered his artistic gift. Oliver began dabbling in acrylic landscape painting as a young man, but for decades he worked as a school counselor, leaving little time for serious art. Once retired, he resumed his hobby in earnest. He'd spend afternoons capturing gentle scenes on canvas, a blossoming apple orchard, a sunset over rolling hills, the reflection of moonlight on a lake. Most paintings were modest in scale, often done in subtle pastels. He found the creative process meditative, a way to cope with loneliness after his wife's passing. Oliver's home studio is a tiny second bedroom filled with canvases, brushes, and tubes of paint. The scent of acrylic and varnish lingers in the air. He's not a professional by any means, yet his work possesses a sincerity and charm. Some neighbors have glimpsed his pieces, like a small meadow scene hung in the living room, and praised their tranquility. Oliver himself remains modest, never boasting about his talent. "It's just something I do to keep my soul at peace," he'd say with a shy grin. If only he'd known that his well-intentioned decision to share these gentle landscapes with the community would spark the scorn of the neighborhood's self-appointed watchdog, leading to heartbreak none could have predicted. The Greenview Terraces Community Hall is a multi-purpose building near the neighborhood's entrance. Painted in tasteful beige tones, it hosts HOA meetings, small gatherings, and sometimes local clubs, like a weekly bridge group and occasional exercise classes for seniors. By day, it's bright and airy, with windows facing the lagoon. By night, it often sits empty unless a scheduled event is taking place. One Monday afternoon, Oliver approached the HOA board with a courteous request. Might he place a small exhibit of his acrylic landscapes in the community hall's back corner? He didn't want to sell them, merely display them for a week or two. Some neighbors have never seen my art, Oliver explained gently. I thought it might brighten the hall. Most board members, including the HOA president, an amiable woman named Margaret Brewer, found the proposal harmless. So long as Oliver's canvases didn't clutter walkways, it seemed a pleasant gesture. With a quick vote, they approved the display on a trial basis. Oliver was thrilled, though he tried to temper his excitement. I just hope some folks enjoy them, he said. Over the next couple of days, Oliver carefully selected 6 paintings. Each depicted a different scene: a sunrise over lilac fields, a coastal cliff at dusk, a row of autumn trees reflecting in still water, and more. He set them on easels along a side wall, affixing a small note that read, "Landscapes by Oliver White, resident artist." Then, with a humble smile, he left the hall, trusting that visitors might pause to appreciate a dash of color in their routine. Many residents were delighted, until they overheard how a certain board member felt about this clutter. As soon as Beatrice Farnham, Karen, noticed Oliver's paintings, she bristled with disapproval. She muttered under her breath about unregulated, personal displays. At first, she lodged mild protests, emailing the board to complain that the exhibit set a dangerous precedent, that soon others would bring knickknacks or trinkets, creating a flea market atmosphere. The other board members dismissed her concerns, citing that Oliver's exhibit had official approval and posed no hazard. Yet Beatrice's hostility simmered. Though the paintings posed no tangible infraction, they offended her sense of control. She regarded them as frivolous, perhaps too sentimental for the clean lines and strict uniformity she championed. The vibrant brushstrokes and subject matter, peaceful meadows, gentle waves, seemed to mock her rigid worldview. In the following days, she made snide remarks to passers-by. Art belongs in a gallery, not a community hall, she'd say. Or, our guidelines never mention turning common spaces into someone's private studio. Some neighbors rolled their eyes, ignoring her. Others warned Oliver, Karen's not happy. Keep an eye on your paintings. Oliver, ever trusting, believed it was just her usual fuss. He didn't expect actual sabotage. After all, they were simple acrylics of calm landscapes. Who could possibly feel threatened by a painting of daisies or a bright orange sunset? But in a place like Greenview Terraces, where minor issues can escalate in a heartbeat, Beatrice, Karen, Farnham's frustration was about to become destructive. The catalyst for Beatrice's meltdown arrived one evening, after a minor disagreement at an HOA board meeting. The members had discussed potential improvements to the community hall, like adding new chairs or upgrading the lighting. Margaret Brewer mentioned how Oliver's paintings actually enhanced the hall's atmosphere, giving the building a more welcoming vibe. Everyone, except Beatrice, nodded in agreement. Beatrice seethed. She hated being overruled, particularly if it involved praising something she disliked. Believing the board was too soft, she resolved to take matters into her own hands. In her mind, Oliver's paintings symbolized an unapproved intrusion. That night, she typed up a letter accusing Oliver of bypassing proper channels, insisting his ugly art might degrade property values if prospective buyers saw it. She also prepared references to obscure bylaw clauses about decorative standards, though none truly applied. She intended to warn him personally. She delivered the letter the next morning, slipping it under Oliver's door. He found it upon waking, reading with confusion, "Your unauthorized display is not in line with the aesthetics of Greenview Terraces. Remove them promptly, or the HOA will do so." Hurt and puzzled, Oliver reached out to the board. Margaret told him the letter didn't represent an official vote and that he could keep the paintings up until they convened another meeting. Relieved, Oliver left them in place, hoping the matter would blow over. It might have ended peacefully, except that Beatrice's anger had escalated past the point of reason. She was determined to force the painting's removal, even if it meant taking drastic and cruel action. Late that night, she quietly entered the hall, guided by an unsettling mixture of resentment and righteous conviction. Thursday dawned bright and breezy. Residents going about their morning routines, walking dogs, heading to work, or jogging, didn't expect to see anything unusual. But as they passed Sunnyvale Drive, near the side entrance to the community hall, they stumbled upon a bizarre scene. Oliver's 6 paintings strewn across the asphalt, some partially on the curb, others lying face down in the gutter. A few canvases bore scratches, smeared paint, or partial tears. Neighbors paused, stunned. They recognized the distinctive pastel scenes from the hall. Who would discard them like garbage? Then, more unsettling details emerged. It looked as if someone had forcibly yanked them off easels. The wooden frames had chipped edges, and muddy footprints marred the once pristine surfaces. One painting, an autumn forest reflection, was sliced almost in half, as if cut or violently ripped. Word spread quickly, and soon a small crowd gathered, whispering in dismay. Some carefully picked up the canvases to prevent further damage. A couple of passers-by took photos, outraged that someone had so blatantly vandalized the gentle old man's art. And in the midst of this confusion stood Oliver himself, who arrived after a phone call from a neighbor telling him about the horrifying discovery. Oliver's face paled. He slowly bent to lift a painting of a moonlit lake, its once luminous surface now marred by a jagged slash. Tears welled in his eyes, though he tried to keep composure. "Who would do this?" he murmured, voice quivering. Residents offered murmurs of sympathy, patting his shoulder. All suspected that Beatrice was behind it. No one else had shown such hostility to Oliver's display. But the proof lay only in her words and attitude. Would she have physically thrown them into the street? Anger and heartbreak rippled across Greenview Terraces. This quiet suburban haven had rarely witnessed such senseless cruelty. The once routine morning took on a grim tension, fueling a collective demand for answers and for justice. By midday, the neighborhood was abuzz. Photos of Oliver's ruined paintings circulated in local social media groups. Some members typed furious posts condemning the vandal, while others urged the HOA to investigate. The news reached Margaret Brewer, who promptly called an emergency board session for that same evening. "Art is not trash," she told everyone. "This is unacceptable." Oliver, shaken, returned home carrying the damaged canvases. A few neighbors accompanied him, helping lay them gently on a kitchen table for inspection. Some pieces were salvageable with minor restoration. Others, like the slashed forest reflection, might be beyond repair. Oliver slumped in a chair, heartbreak radiating from him. He never dreamed his peaceful hobby could incite such violence. Meanwhile, rumors pointed strongly at Beatrice Farnham. Many had seen her hostility, read her scathing letter. A couple of neighbors recalled spotting her car near the community hall late the previous night. No one had direct footage or eyewitness proof, but the circumstantial evidence was powerful. Karen Farnham's name was on everyone's lips, accompanied by exasperated sighs or exclamations of anger. In a rare show of unity, folks from all corners of the neighborhood, young families, older retirees, even busy professionals, voiced support for Oliver. They demanded the HOA punish whoever was responsible. Some proposed rallying around Oliver's art in a public demonstration. The mood was no longer timid or apathetic. It carried a righteous zeal for calling out cruelty. Meanwhile, up in her meticulously maintained townhouse, Beatrice likely sensed the rising storm. But in her mind, she might have convinced herself that she'd done the community a favor, removing an eyesore. That chilling certainty of moral high ground, combined with her disdain for Oliver's artwork, hinted that she'd show no remorse at the upcoming meeting. That afternoon, while Oliver sat quietly repairing a torn canvas with gentle dabs of glue, a group of neighbors hatched a plan. They gathered in a small circle at the local coffee shop just outside Greenview Terraces. 10 or so residents, from a schoolteacher to a retired Army vet, all felt outraged that the kind older man had been subjected to such meanness. They wanted not only to find justice for Oliver, but to reaffirm that creativity and kindness deserved a place in their community. A mother of 2 proposed reframing or remounting any paintings that could be saved. "We'll pool funds if needed," she said. Another neighbor, an amateur carpenter, volunteered to build or fix any broken easels. The teacher offered to have her students create supportive signs or small art pieces to be displayed alongside Oliver's. Some suggested contacting local press, though Oliver seemed hesitant about public attention. All he wanted was to share beauty, one woman said, frustration clear in her voice. Greenview shouldn't be a place where that leads to vandalism. Heads nodded around the circle. They resolved to speak en masse at the emergency HOA meeting, demanding a thorough investigation and a statement of condemnation. Margaret Brewer, informed of the plan, privately expressed relief that so many were standing with Oliver. She, too, felt the HOA should champion positivity, not bow to a tyrannical board member's personal vendetta. A sense of solidarity blossomed, neighbors from different backgrounds uniting against cruelty. Oliver remained touched by these gestures. Gently flipping through the battered canvases, he whispered that he wasn't sure if the paintings were worth all this fuss. But the neighbors insisted, it's not just about the paintings. It's about the principle. They would not let an act of malice intimidate them. In a community often characterized by superficial harmony, genuine empathy was finally shining through. In the days leading up to the emergency HOA meeting, the support for Oliver took a more concrete shape. The neighbors decided on a mini art show to exhibit his paintings, both old and newly repaired, at the community hall. The event would serve as a direct response to the vandalism, showcasing that art and kindness still thrived in Greenview Terraces. If the board agreed, the lounge could be decorated with Oliver's recovered works, plus supportive crafts from local kids. They also envisioned turning it into a small neighborhood gathering. A couple of volunteers offered to bring baked goods, while a high school violinist might perform gentle background music. The highlight would be a short speech by Oliver, if he felt comfortable, about the joy of painting and how the community had come together. Multiple neighbors scoured local shops for new frames, collecting donations to replace those destroyed. Others helped Oliver retouch scratched areas. Despite the heartbreak, Oliver brightened at the thought of displaying his work again. He meticulously reworked the torn forest reflection piece until, though still imperfect, it carried a new sense of resilience. Scars can be part of art, too, he said softly, brushing the final strokes. Word spread throughout the neighborhood about the proposed show. Residents who scarcely knew Oliver pitched in. A father who'd once borrowed Oliver's ladder for a roofing project donated a large wooden frame. A teen who delivered newspapers helped design a promotional flyer. The synergy was remarkable. Yet, looming over all was the question, would the board, and particularly Beatrice Farnham, try to block the event? Wednesday evening arrived. The emergency HOA meeting, held at the community hall. A record turnout packed the seats. At the front table sat the board members, Margaret Brewer, a couple of older men, and one younger woman. An empty chair marked the absence of a recently resigned member. Beatrice Farnham stood off to the side, arms folded, face set in a steely glare. Margaret opened the floor, acknowledging the reason for the gathering. We all know about the vandalism of Oliver White's paintings. This is a grave matter that goes beyond minor disputes. We need clarity. She then invited statements from neighbors. A flurry of voices erupted. Some recounted seeing Beatrice's car near the hall after dark. Others referenced her repeated complaints about Oliver's art. While no direct eyewitness had caught her in the act, the circumstantial evidence was overwhelming. Furious condemnation poured forth, accusing her of a hateful crime that went against the community's values. Beatrice, when prompted, displayed neither guilt nor remorse. Instead, she doubled down, scoffing that Oliver's works were an eyesore and amateur attempts at art. She denied physically throwing them out, claiming someone else must have removed the ugly stuff. Gasps echoed at her callous language. She pivoted to a tirade about property value preservation and strict uniformity in decor. The crowd bristled, thoroughly unimpressed. Margaret eventually restored order. Then Oliver, quietly trembling, spoke from the front row. He thanked everyone for their help and recounted how the paintings ended up in the street, physically and metaphorically crushed. The hush that fell over the room was thick with empathy. At the end, Oliver's voice quavered. I only wanted to share something beautiful. I never expected it to provoke such anger. This heartfelt moment paved the way for neighbors to present their plan for a mini art show. Margaret proposed it as a formal motion, a weekend exhibit celebrating Oliver's pieces, open to all. The entire board, except Beatrice, voted in favor. The crowd cheered, many hugging Oliver. Meanwhile, Beatrice scowled in silence, her influence apparently waning. In the wake of that meeting, Beatrice Farnham found herself in a precarious position. Public sentiment had turned sharply against her. Friends who once admired her firm approach backed away, unwilling to defend vandalism. Rumors circulated that the board might vote to remove her from her committee post if she continued to stir conflict. Furious yet cornered, Beatrice attempted a last stand. She fired off a series of strongly worded letters to the board, referencing obscure bylaws about unapproved gatherings and excess interior decorations. She claimed the art show violated the spirit of minimalism and uniformity. However, Margaret and the other board members swiftly dismissed her claims, clarifying that the event was officially sanctioned, well within the hall's intended use. Deprived of any official recourse, Beatrice resorted to petty sabotage. One evening, a neighbor found her surreptitiously measuring the hall's interior, grumbling that the show was over the allowed capacity for freestanding items. She threatened to call the fire marshal, but an actual phone call to local authorities confirmed no code was being broken. Undeterred, she kept complaining publicly, insisting the entire show was a fiasco that no one in their right mind wants. But for every bitter remark from Karen, the wave of compassion for Oliver only grew stronger. With each vitriolic complaint, more neighbors volunteered to help set up the exhibit or donate supplies. They saw how far she'd sunk, apparently incapable of admitting wrongdoing. And as the community rallied around the gentle painter, Beatrice retreated into isolation, refusing to attend any pre-event planning sessions. Oliver, for his part, refused to direct any personal malice at her. "I pity her," he admitted once, quietly. "I wish she could find some peace in her heart." His grace under pressure only strengthened people's resolve to honor him and his art in a grand, positive way. A bright Saturday morning dawned, the day of the mini-art show. Volunteers bustled in the community hall from early hours, arranging stands and tables draped with soft cloth. Half of the main room was devoted to Oliver's paintings, some new, some lovingly restored. The others displayed cheerful drawings from local kids, homemade crafts, and supportive notes. Strings of fairy lights hung overhead, casting a gentle glow. An aroma of baked goods, cookies, muffins, and brownies wafted from a refreshment table. When the doors opened at 10 a.m., a surprising crowd streamed in. Families with strollers, older couples, a group of teenagers fresh from sports practice. Everyone was curious to see the art. They slowly filed past Oliver's landscapes, pausing to admire the gentle brushwork. The once-torn forest reflection piece, now patched and reworked, drew special attention. A few neighbors quietly wiped away tears, remembering how it had been found in tatters. Oliver stood near the front, greeting visitors with shy gratitude. He wore a simple button-down shirt and a small name tag reading "Artist." Despite his modesty, the effusive praise moved him deeply. People complimented the dreamy colors or recognized a scene from a local orchard. Some even asked if prints were available, to which Oliver blushed, explaining he never thought about selling them. Margaret Brewer made a brief speech, lauding Oliver's perseverance and the community's unity. "Let this day remind us that Greenview Terraces can be a place where creativity flourishes," she said. "We reject cruelty, and we celebrate art." The crowd cheered. A local high school violinist then performed a soft piece, setting a warm, uplifting mood. Notably absent from the festivities was Beatrice Farnham. A few neighbors saw her prowling outside earlier, eyes narrowed at the bustling hall, but she never entered. Regardless, the day proceeded joyfully, culminating in Oliver receiving a framed certificate of appreciation from the HOA for contributions to neighborhood spirit. The applause that followed thundered in the small hall, echoing with triumph over negativity. In the days after the mini-art show, the sense of community pride lingered. Photos from the event popped up across social media, generating encouraging comments from both residents and outsiders who stumbled on the story. Encouraged by the success, the HOA board announced new guidelines to make Greenview Terraces more welcoming to resident creativity. Community Hall Showcase. Once a month, neighbors could display paintings, crafts, or photography on the hall's walls or easels, so long as it didn't obstruct safety paths. Art and Culture Committee. A subcommittee was formed, headed by Margaret Brewer, to manage and promote cultural events. Oliver was invited to serve as an honorary advisor. Zero tolerance for vandalism. The board updated the bylaws, clarifying that any intentional destruction of another's property or purposeful sabotage in common areas would trigger immediate fines or board action. These reforms had broad support, although some had worried that more relaxed display rules might open the door to tacky or overwhelming decor. The recent events convinced them that banning personal expression entirely was stifling. They'd rather risk the occasional mismatch than face more cruelty. The new approach fostered a sense of unity that ironically had been missing in such a regulated place. Meanwhile, the notion of a weekly gallery corner emerged. Each Sunday afternoon, a small space in the hall would be dedicated to a rotating mini-exhibit. Residents who painted, sketched, or crafted could sign up to showcase a few pieces. Volunteers would help with setup, ensuring the area stayed neat. It was a gentle, ongoing nod to what Oliver's show had achieved. The neighbors hoped that soon, more hidden talents would emerge from behind the closed doors of Greenview Terraces. As for Beatrice Farnham, her aura of invincibility was shattered. Though she retained her house and membership, the board stripped her of the community standards enforcement role. Several neighbors demanded she publicly apologize to Oliver, but she refused, maintaining her innocence. She remained in the background, an object lesson in how a single destructive act can backfire spectacularly in a community bound by empathy. It's been several months since the day neighbors found Oliver's paintings strewn across Sunnyvale Drive. Greenview Terraces has undergone a subtle but significant transformation. The ubiquitous tension that once accompanied every minor violation has eased. People feel freer to share their personal touches, whether it's a small garden gnome or a seasonal wreath, without dreading the wrath of Karen. Oliver White, for his part, has become something of a local celebrity. He remains modest, continuing to paint tranquil scenes in his tiny studio. Occasionally, a neighbor will request a personal commission, a painting of their childhood home, or a depiction of Greenview's lagoon at dawn. Oliver obliges when the mood strikes, always refusing major payments. "This is my therapy," he'll say with a smile, "and my gratitude belongs to you all." The weekly gallery corner thrives. Last month, a retired couple displayed watercolor portraits of their grandchildren. Next month, a teenage photographer plans to share black and white snapshots of local wildlife. Each new exhibit draws a small crowd, sipping lemonade, chatting about art, forging bonds. The acts of creativity that once might have been stifled now flourish under the HOA's new, more open-minded leadership. On quiet afternoons, Oliver still gazes at the battered forest reflection painting, now mounted in a fresh oak frame. A faint line where the canvas was torn remains visible, a testament to adversity. Yet Oliver no longer sees it as a reminder of cruelty. To him, it symbolizes the resilience and kindness that emerged from heartbreak. In that sense, the painting stands for Greenview Terraces itself. Once threatened by a tyrannical desire for uniformity, now strengthened by a shared commitment to acceptance and community spirit. And Beatrice Farnham, Karen, still lives in the neighborhood, her presence far diminished. She seldom attends events, and when she does, her remarks are measured, aware that any further aggression might lead to official consequences. If she passes by the weekly gallery, she might cast a lingering glance at the displayed artworks, though no one ever sees her comment. Whether she's learned or not remains unclear. But for everyone else in Greenview Terraces, the message is clear: cruelty has no place here. In the end, the battered canvases of Oliver White did far more than line the street that ill-fated morning. They ignited the soul of a community, reminding neighbors that artistry and compassion triumph over intimidation. And so, in this peaceful corner of suburbia, the memory of a violent outburst has blossomed into a living testament to creativity, a story that, long after the paint dries, still resonates through every gentle brushstroke and every neighborly smile.